Welcome to the TOEFL listening section. In this part, you will hear one or more conversations in an academic or campus context, such as a discussion between a student and a professor, or between two students. You may take notes while listening. Listen to part of a conversation. You will hear it only once, so listen carefully. After the conversation, you will answer questions about what you heard. Some questions will ask you about main ideas and details. Others will ask about implied meaning, speaker attitude, or how ideas relate to one another. Use both what is stated and what is implied to answer.
Good afternoon, Dr. Morales. Thanks for meeting with me. I wanted to talk about player psychology and engagement for my thesis and get your advice on framing the research.
Good afternoon, Ethan. I am glad you came. Player psychology and engagement is a rich topic. Tell me what angle you are considering and what you already know.
I am interested in motivation mechanics in interactive entertainment. I want to compare intrinsic motivators like mastery and autonomy with extrinsic rewards like points and loot boxes and see how they affect retention.
That is a useful contrast. Make sure you ground the work in established theories. For example, self-determination theory explains intrinsic motivation through competence, autonomy, and relatedness.
Yes, I plan to use self-determination theory as a framework. I also read about operant conditioning and reinforcement schedules. How do those two perspectives fit together in game design research?
They complement each other. Self-determination theory explains why players find activities satisfying. Operant conditioning explains how repeated reinforcement shapes behavior. A designer can use both to create systems that promote long-term engagement rather than only short-term spikes.
Could you give me an example of a reinforcement schedule that boosts engagement and one that supports intrinsic motivation?
Sure. Variable ratio schedules are common in monetized games. A variable ratio reward, like random loot draws, tends to provoke higher engagement because the unpredictability triggers dopamine responses. For intrinsic motivation, you would design progression loops that scaffold skill building and give clear feedback on mastery.
I see. So variable ratio increases play frequency but might not build competence or autonomy. Does that mean it can hurt retention in the long run?
Exactly. If a player is only chasing random rewards without learning or social connection, they may burn out or churn once the novelty wears off. That is why mixed strategies often work best. Combine occasional unpredictable rewards with reliable systems that reinforce skill and choice.
When you say mixed strategies, do you mean combining extrinsic and intrinsic motivators in the same loop?
Yes. For example, a mobile puzzle game might give a random cosmetic item as a surprise after a milestone, but also provide a clear mastery ladder, optional challenges that support autonomy, and social features that create relatedness.
That makes sense. I am thinking of studying different player cohorts to see which motivators predict retention. What metrics should I instrument to measure engagement effectively?
Measure retention curves like day 1, day 7, and day 30 retention. Also track session length, session frequency, progression milestones, completion rates, and churn triggers. Collect qualitative data too, like self-reports, about why players return.
How do you balance ethical concerns, especially when studying systems like loot boxes that use variable ratio schedules?
Ethics are central. You must be transparent about monetization and avoid manipulating vulnerable populations. In research, you can simulate mechanics without real money and debrief participants. Discuss harm reduction strategies like spending caps and clear odds disclosure in your thesis.
That is helpful. I want to include case studies. Which games illustrate good use of intrinsic motivators and which show problems with over-reliance on extrinsic rewards?
For intrinsic motivators, look at games that emphasize mastery, like puzzle platforms, where difficulty ramps and feedback is immediate. For problematic examples, look at some gotcha systems that rely heavily on random pulls. Use those to analyze trade-offs and player sentiment.
I plan to run playtests with prototypes. How should I structure tasks to reveal motivational differences between players?
Design tasks that isolate variables. Have one group experience clear skill progression with optional challenges. Have another group experience the same gain but with added random rewards. Compare retention engagement metrics and subjective enjoyment. Include interviews to capture long-term motives.
When analyzing interviews, what themes should I look for to link back to theory?
Look for language of competence like mastering a level talk about autonomy, like choosing strategies and relatedness like social comparison or cooperation. Also note references to compulsion or chasing rewards which point to extrinsic drivers.
I worry about confounding variables like novelty effects and cohort differences. Any advice on reducing noise?
Use random assignment and control conditions. Run studies across multiple sessions to move past novelty. Segment players by previous experience and control for that statistically. Pre-register your hypotheses to avoid cherry picking.
What about social mechanics, like leaderboards or cooperative modes? How do these affect engagement psychologically?
Social mechanics can increase relatedness and social facilitation. Leaderboards may motivate competitive players, but can demotivate others. Cooperative modes often boost retention through social bonds. The key is to design for diverse player types and provide opt-in options.
Do you recommend any specific quantitative models or statistical tests for my analysis?
Survival analysis is useful for retention. Mixed effects models handle repeated measures. Mediation analysis can show whether motivation mediates the effect of mechanics on retention. Combine that with qualitative coding for a mixed methods approach.
That gives me a clear direction. For my literature review, I will cover self-determination theory, operant conditioning, reinforcement schedules, and social motivation. Then I will use mixed methods to test prototype variants.
Excellent. Also include discussion of ethical design and policy implications. Player psychology informs business decisions and regulatory debates, so your conclusions should consider societal impact.
One last question. How do I frame practical recommendations for designers based on my findings?
Translate results into design patterns. For example, recommend using variable rewards, sparingly combine them with mastery systems. Provide clear progression and social features and instrument metrics to test assumptions. Offer templates for onboarding scaffolds and ethical guardrails.
Thank you, Dr. Morales. This conversation clarified both theory and methodology and gave me concrete next steps.
You are welcome, Ethan. Send me a research plan draft, and we will refine the instruments and the consent materials together.
Listen again to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
A variable ratio reward, like random loot draws, tends to provoke higher engagement because the unpredictability triggers dopamine responses.
This concludes the conversation portion. For more TOEFL practice tests and study materials, visit Spinta.org.